famines and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
When asked what would be the sign of his second coming, Jesus replied that there would be wars and rumors of wars. We are witnessing this right now in Iran, North Korea, China, and around the world. Are we nearing the second coming? Absolutely. Well, the news is just hitting us from every side. So many developments are taking place, and all of them relate to the prophecies of the Bible in one way or another. I want to first of all take you to the peace plan. I know we're all intensely interested because President Trump has put together the deal of the century, and they have been planning on releasing it just at any time. However, one thing after another has caused a delay. Well, now the announcement has been made, and they say they're not changing it. Here's the story from Israel National News. We aren't planning to release the revealing date of the peace plan. The U.S. State Department released a statement saying that they will not change the planned date for the release of the deal of the century, regardless of the political situation in Israel. The release date for the economic portion of the plan is June 25th through the 26th at the conference in Bahrain. The UN will not attend the Bahrain Economic Conference because the UN does not approve of the U.S. leading the peace talks. Nevertheless, this appears now to be a firm date, just 25 days or so from right now. Now, in addition to that, another story has developed. Israel, the United States, and Russia are planning a trilateral meeting in Jerusalem this month to discuss Syria. Israel wants Iran to be banished from Syria. As a matter of fact, Israel wants all of the foreign powers that were not in Syria prior to the Syrian civil war. Israel wants all of those to leave and everything to go back to the way as it was before the civil war began about 8 years ago. This comes from the Jerusalem Post on the 30th of May. A trilateral Israeli, U.S., and Russian meeting of national security advisors is scheduled to take place in Israel in June to deal with regional security issues and is expected to focus on Iran's involvement in Syria. On Wednesday night, just before the Knesset decided to dissolve itself, the White House issued a statement saying that the U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, Israeli National Security Advisor Meir Ben-Shabbat, and Russian Secretary of the Security Council Nikolai Patrushev will meet in Jerusalem in June to discuss regional security issues. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu mentioned the planned meeting in the agitated statement he gave after the Knesset vote, saying that these are the issues the country should be dealing with, not another round of elections. I proposed to U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin to form a U.S., Russia, Israel trilateral committee that would meet in Jerusalem to discuss the security situation in the Middle East, and both of them agreed, Netanyahu said. This is unprecedented. A meeting like this has never taken place before in Israel. Never. Netanyahu said at the time that the objective of removing Iranian troops from Syria is not Israel's alone. He proposed setting up a team with others to promote the goal of removing all foreign forces from Syrian soil and returning the situation regarding foreign troops to what it was before the start of the Syrian civil war. Now let's pause right here to note something. When Russia, the United States, and Israel get together in Jerusalem this month, could this meeting be a precursor to Russia and the U.S. working together to sponsor Middle East peace talks? Now, we know something is going to bring about a breakthrough. We know there's a peace agreement coming. We don't know for sure it's going to be Trump's peace agreement, but it's prophesied in the Bible. It's going to happen. When it happens, this will mark the beginning of the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus to this earth. This will be the greatest prophetic fulfillment in the last 2,000 years. As soon as you say end time, they say, whoa, the end of the world. When's it going to be? And you can see this mask of fear. I'm not telling you the end time is coming. I'm telling you, you live in it right now. Daniel chapter number 7, verse number 4. The first beast was like a lion. We have the eagle used continually to depict the United States of America. You see it on governmental We are the generation for which these that you will not miss one segment of understanding the end time, because I've had many people tell me it's changed their life forever. Many of the major prophecies of the Bible are given to us 2, 3, some of them as high as 4 or 5 times. There is not any chance it's not going to happen, because it's in your Bible, it's prophesied, and the prophecies always coming back. Now, things are not remaining the same in Israel right now. Things are continuing to develop. Over the last year or two, the Israeli police are starting to tighten down, and no longer are they allowing these spontaneous riots that the Arabs like to put on every time something happens that they do not agree with. Consequently, the Arabs realize a shift is taking place, and the Jews realize it as well. Now, let me bring you up to date, because I've been to Israel every single year ever since 1993. I've watched this shift happen. Back in 1993, our tours could go to the Temple Mount. We could go through the Al-Aqsa Mosque and through the Dome of the Rock. That's no longer allowed. Now, we couldn't even go onto the Temple Mount for 2 or 3 years. Everything was frozen. Then it opened back up. However, when it opened back up, we could no longer go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, nor could we go to the Dome of the Rock, but we still can visit the Temple Mount. Back in those times, I'm talking about the early 2000s, you saw no Jews on the Temple Mount. Their rabbis had taught them that they should not go there. And furthermore, there was a lot of pressure for them not to go there. But over time, some of the rabbis said, you know, several thousand Arabs go up, Muslims go up to worship on the Temple Mount. And they're sending a message to the world, no Jews ever go. It's as though we don't even care about this place. We're afraid that if we don't start visiting the Temple Mount, that the message will be transmitted that we don't really care. Consequently, certain rabbis begin to say, you can go up, just stay away from the location of the Holy of Holies and the temple itself. So little by little, they begin to go up. You would see clusters of 5 or 10, and that happened for several years. But then it began to build. There were organizations put together to actually encourage Jews to go up to the Temple Mount. Now, they said we must go up. Well, after a while, sometimes there would be 100 per day. Then it increased to 500 until it became commonplace. The Arabs tried to stop it, but the Jewish police kept tightening down the screws on any counter demonstrations. Now, they allowed the Muslims to worship there. They didn't interfere with their visits or with their worships. But when they tried to interfere with Jewish visits, that's when the Israeli police came down stronger and stronger and stronger. So what has developed to right now? In 2017, there were 16,000 Jews that visited the Temple Mount over the period of 1 year. 2018, there were 18,000 Jews that visited the Temple Mount in the first 6 months. So Jewish visitation on the Temple Mount is increasing exponentially. The Arabs know that. They feel that happening to them. Consequently, normally during the month of Ramadan, Jews don't go up to the Temple Mount because Ramadan is the holiest month of the year for the Muslims. And then the last days of Ramadan, that's when as high as 250,000 Muslims come to worship on the Temple Mount in a single day. However, the last days of Ramadan this year coincided with Jerusalem Day. Jerusalem Day is a big deal to the Jews. That's when they celebrate the reunification of Jerusalem in the 1967 war. So the Jews insisted on going up. Now the dilemma. When the Jews went up, the Arabs began to throw chairs and rocks. Immediately, the Israeli police moved in, squashed the riots, and before long, once again, the Jews were visiting on Jerusalem Day on the Temple Mount. I've got the story here. Let me just give some of it to you. Arabs riot as Jews are allowed to enter the Temple Mount on Jerusalem Day. This comes from the Jerusalem Post just yesterday. Following the report that Jews will be allowed to enter the Temple Mount for Jerusalem Day, riots broke out on the Temple Mount on Sunday, according to the police spokesperson's unit. The commander of the Jerusalem district, Major General Doron Yedid, ordered the police to enter the Temple Mount and take care of the rioters. As the police attempted to enter the place, Arab worshipers began throwing stones, chairs, and other objects at the forces. The forces responded with riot dispersal means. Jews are generally forbidden to enter the compound during the last days of the month of Ramadan. The police, however, allowed the entrance of Jews, especially for Jerusalem Day. After the riots subsided, Jews slowly began entering the area. Now, why are we looking at this today? Because the Bible prophesies that the Temple Mount is going to be placed under a sharing arrangement once this peace agreement is signed. so that both Jews and Muslims will be allowed to worship there. The Jews will even be allowed to build their third temple on the Temple Mount without disturbing the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is all prophesied in the Bible. So as we see Israel becoming more and more assertive and stopping the riots, as we see those things, it's an indicator that we're moving in the direction that the Bible says is going to happen. Now, along with these developments, and all this relates between Russia and Israel and the United States meeting in Jerusalem and the pushing of the Trump peace plan later on this month in Bahrain. And by the way, Saudi Arabia is going to be there, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Israel is going to be there. So these things are moving forward in spite of the strong opposition being put forward by the Palestinians in particular. Well, along with these developments, there are parallel developments in other areas of prophetic fulfillment that we need to take a look at. For example, an article just appeared entitled, "Pope Pleas for European Unity Says Ideologies Threaten Its Existence." This comes from Reuters just yesterday. The Pope Francis, made an impassioned plea for Europe to stick together and revive the ideals of its founders on Sunday, saying ideologies and fear-mongering politicians were threatening its very existence as a bloc. The Pope's comments to journalists on the plane while returning from a 3-day trip to Romania, one of the more recent European Union members, were his first since European elections were held last month. Francis, who was asked about the elections, Italian far-right leader Matteo Salvini, and other European topics, urged believers to pray for European unity and non-believers to hope for it from the bottom of your hearts. Now let's pause there just a moment. Why is the Pope so concerned with European unity? There's a good reason why. The Bible prophesies the rebirth of the Holy Roman Empire. That actually has now taken place as of November the 3rd of 2009. So 28 nations, the 28 nations of Europe, have all converged together, first of all under what was called the Common Market, and later on it has become known as the European Union, because it's now far beyond a common market. It has become a political union. They now have their own constitution, and they also have a president and a foreign minister. So they're moving toward a United States of Europe right now, and the Pope, realizing that these last elections had produced somewhat of a backlash because some of the members of the European Union don't like the loss of national sovereignty that they're presently experiencing. The exit of Britain from the European Union has stirred up some of these nationalistic feelings. Others of the nations are saying, maybe we should exit the European Union as well. So now the Pope is trying to countermand that and to get the people to continue on with the process of the total unification of the nations of Europe, so that the European Union will actually become a nation in its own right. So that's what we're experiencing here. The article goes on to say, the far right and nationalists in Italy, Britain, France, and Poland came out on top in their national votes, shaking up politics at home, but failing to dramatically alter the balance of pro-European power in the EU Assembly. Okay, now let's pause there, because many people are reporting, oh, the nationalists won. They're throwing the people that want to be globalists, they're throwing them out of office. That's not true. It is true that the nationalists made some gains, but they didn't come close to shaking the pro-European stranglehold on power. they are still very much in power. Such people as Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, Angela Merkel, the prime minister, the chancellor of Germany, and others. They're very much there, continuing to push for European unification. Now, that's so important because the Bible prophesies European unification. And furthermore, it's important because the Bible prophesies that the Antichrist and the false prophet will come out of this present rise of European unification. That shows you how close we are to the end time. So when you have the Pope making an impassioned plea, everyone pray that European unification will continue to go forward. It's because in the Holy Roman Empire, since it was first established in 800 AD, the Pope has always played a central role. There have always been two leaders, a political leader and a spiritual leader. The political leader has always been the most powerful and popular politician from Europe. The spiritual leader has always been the Pope from Rome. That's the reason that it's been called for the last 1,000 years the Holy Roman Empire. We are watching the reascendancy of the Holy Roman Empire right now. The Pope knows this, and that's the reason he is appealing to people to pray that this process will continue, because he understands that if this European Union can come together as it has been together over the last 1,000 years, that it can actually become the dominant force for the world. And the Bible tells us that is in fact going to happen for a short period of time in the near future. The political leader that will end up leading the Holy Roman Empire, he will be called in your Bible the beast or the Antichrist. The spiritual leader is going to be the false prophet. So we're watching all of these things taking place right now, and that's the reason I wanted you to take a look at this article. The article goes on to say, someone could ask under their breath, is this perhaps the end of a 70-year adventure, he said. Now, why is he talking about a 70-year adventure? Because in 1957, the common market was formed. It then ended up being a total union of economies by 1992. They then switched to trying to produce political union, and that process has been ongoing since that time. One of the big keys of that process has been the adoption of a common money. Many of the nations of the European Union have now adopted the euro for their money. So they're moving together more and more. The power is moving out of the states and into the European Union. That's the reason the Pope is so anxious that these elections that just took place, where the globalists experienced a temporary setback, he's praying, let's not lose the momentum that we've had in this 70-year experiment, because it started in 1957, and here we are in 2019. It's a little bit over 70 years. The Pope went on to say Europe had to again take up the mysticism of its founding fathers and overcome divisions and borders. Does that sound familiar? We have the same argument taking place here in the United States of America. They're saying we should overcome divisions and borders. We should all have a global society. There's a big debate between globalism and national sovereignty in our country right now, and I'm sure it will be one of the central issues in the next election. The Pope went on to say, please, let's not let Europe be overcome by pessimism or by ideologies, because Europe is not being attacked by cannons or bombs in this moment, but by ideologies that are not European, that come either from outside, he's referring to the United States, or which stem from small groups in Europe, he said. Francis urged Europeans to remember how the continent was divided and belligerent in the years leading up to both world wars in the 20th century. Please, let's not return to the conditions that caused those two major wars. Let's learn from history. Let's not fall into the same hole. That's what the Pope is speaking to Europe right now. And it's so interesting when we see all of this developing. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says there will be wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in different places, many upheavals. We're experiencing that right now. The disciples had asked Jesus, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And Jesus said, don't let any man deceive you, because these things will happen prior to my second coming. They're happening right now. We are approaching the second coming of Jesus Christ. We all have to educate ourselves in the prophecies of the Bible. I have one more article I want to present to you. This article is entitled, Beijing Warns U.S. Not to Underestimate Chinese Military. Beijing warned Friday that the U.S. should not underestimate China's military as the top defense officials from both countries met on the sidelines of a security forum. As Beijing and Washington vie for influence in a region hosting potential flashpoints such as the South China Sea, Korean Peninsula, and the Taiwan Strait. Acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan met with Chinese Defense Minister General Wei Feng for 20 minutes on Friday. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Quan said they reached some consensus on issues of common concern, adding that Wei particularly emphasized the Taiwan issue. China sees Taiwan as part of its territory to be reunified, despite the two sides having been ruled separately since the end of the Civil War on the mainland in 1949. So we're talking about 70 years now. These two entities have been separate nations. Now, beyond that, Taiwan was ruled by Japan from 1905 until 1949. That's when the communists swept through mainland China, defeated Chiang Kai-shek. He was forced to flee to the island called Formosa at the time. Today it's called Taiwan. And there he set up what was called Free China. Well, that's taken place. So since 1905, mainland China has not controlled Taiwan. And yet here we are, 120 years later. China still claims, oh, that belongs to us. It doesn't belong to them whatsoever. But the fact that Chinese went from mainland China to Taiwan in order to escape communist domination, they see that as a problem, a discrediting of their power and authority. And so they continually claim that Taiwan must reunify with the mainland. Now, recently, Taiwan elected an independence-minded president, and that has caused the conflict between Taiwan and Beijing to increase. Now, in the meantime, the Taiwan Straits separate Taiwan from the mainland. I think it's about 80 miles wide. China claims authority over this entire course, but U.S. warships continue to go through there without permission. Let me just give you the details. Beijing is regularly and angered by U.S. warships transiting through the Taiwan Strait, which it considers its territorial waters. Defense Minister Wei pointed out that the U.S. has recently had a series of negative words and actions on this issue, Wu said, adding that Beijing was firmly opposed to this. on the issue of safeguarding national sovereignty and territory integrity, the U.S. should not underestimate the determination, will, and ability of the Chinese military. Now let's pause just a moment, because China has been running huge trade surpluses ever since 1980. They have been averaging 10% growth per year, huge surpluses. With America alone, they run about a $500 billion surplus per year. What are they doing with all of this excess money? They have been building warships. They have been building missiles, airports, armies, Air Force, many things. But, well, because they had all this money to spend, they have built themselves very strong militarily, and they're warning America, don't underestimate our military might. Now, according to recent articles I have read, China claims to have intercontinental ballistic missiles equipped with nuclear weapons that can reach every major city in America. Now, that's alarming to all of us. This article goes on to say Washington has been pushing back against Beijing's militarization of the South China Sea, and ahead of Friday's meeting, Shanahan told reporters that facilities in China that China was building on reclaimed land in the South China Sea appeared to be an overkill if they were purely defensive. Now, what's going on here? China has gone out and they have built up islands that didn't even exist between them and Taiwan. And then once they build these islands, they declare all around this 25 miles is Chinese territory, because these islands now are part of China. So what they're now doing, they're building surface-to-air missiles, long runways. And these new developments, according to Mr. Shanahan, seems to be excessive. A top U.S. general said earlier this week that Chinese President Xi Jinping had reneged on promises by building 10,000-foot runways, ammunition storage facilities, routine deployment of missile defense capabilities, aviation capabilities on these reclaimed islands, these reclaimed lands. Definitively, we are seeing more competition between the U.S. and China, not just traditional fields, but also in technology. And I think this is something that we have to watch very carefully. That statement was made by Mr. Ho, who is Singapore's Prime Minister. Let me back up. Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said in a keynote speech to the gathering Friday evening, we're talking about 3 or 4 days ago, the U.S.-China bilateral relationship is the most important in the world today, urging them to work together. Even short of outright conflict, a prolonged period of tension and uncertainty will be extremely damaging, he warned, adding that serious international problems would not be addressed without the full participation of both powers. Now, this isn't even mentioning the trade conflict that we're presently in with China. Because China has been running a trade surplus with the U.S. of $500 billion over the last many years, and because our leaders have accepted that and done nothing about it, and then all of a sudden President Trump says, wait a minute, we can't keep going this direction. We've got to balance our trade with you. So he's trying to negotiate these things, but the Chinese are not wanting to budge. This is causing a lot of conflict between America and China right now. Now add this to the military tensions that are coming to the surface, and it does produce a dangerous situation, especially since we know that the Bible prophesies a great war that's going to kill 1/3 of mankind. China has 1.3 billion people. And if another country such as India with 1.3 billion, those two countries together would be 2.5 billion. That means that would be 1/3 of the human race. Now, when we talk about this, we do it with dread and with great reservations. But this war is coming. You can read about it in Revelation chapter number 9, verse 13 through 16. Actually, if you want to read the whole account, it's all the way down to verse 21. That's Revelation 9, verse 13 through 21. You can read about the war that will kill 1/3 part of mankind. It's a sobering prophecy, but it's in your Bible, it's in mine. The prophecies always come to pass, and we should never doubt that.